Let's begin this subject Industrial Relations of the 5th semester from IPU University. First of all, let's see the syllabus of your first unit. Unit 1 comprises of Industrial Relations, Definition and Main Aspects. Industrial Disputes and Strikes. Collective Bargaining. Labor Legislation, Labor Management Cooperation/Workers' Participation in Management. Let's start with the first topic. Industrial Relations, Definition and Main Aspects. Industrial relations refer to the relationship between employers and employees in the workplace, including issues such as wages, working conditions, and union management relations. The main aspects of industrial relations include collective bargaining, labor laws and regulations, and the role of labor unions. Other key elements include workplace safety, employee benefits and compensation, and dispute resolution. The field of industrial relations also includes the study of labor management relations and the impact of these relationships on organizations and society as a whole. Now let us look at some important questions for your exam point of view. Question number 1. What are the various methods to improve industrial relations? ANS. Some of the major measures for improving employer-employee relations are as follows. 1. Sound human resource policies. Policies and procedures concerning the compensation, transfer, promotion, etc. of employees should be fair and transparent. All policies and rules relating to employer-employee relations should be clear to everybody in the enterprise and to the union leaders. 2. Constructive attitudes. Both management and trade unions should adopt positive attitudes towards each other. The employer should accept workers as equal partners in a joint endeavor. Unions and workers, on their part, must recognize and accept the rights of employers. 3. Collective bargaining. Employers' organizations as well as trade unions should be able and willing to deal with mutual problems freely and responsibly. Both should accept collective bargaining as the cornerstone of good employer-employee relations. Problem-centered negotiations rather than a legalistic approach is desired. 4. Responsible unions. Unions should adopt a responsible rather than political approach to employer-employee relations. Unions should accept private ownership and operations of industry. A strong, democratic, and responsible union alone can ensure that workers honor the agreement with their employer. 5. Employee welfare. Employers should recognize the need for the welfare of workers. They must ensure reasonable wages, satisfactory working conditions, opportunities for training and development, and other necessary facilities for labor. 6. Grievance procedure. A well-established and properly administered system for the timely and satisfactory redressal of employees' grievances can be very helpful in improving employer-employee relations. It provides an outlet for tensions and frustrations of workers. Explain in detail the importance of industrial relations in context of present Indian industrial setup. ANS, industrial relations, is concerned with the relationships between management and workers and the role of regulatory mechanism in resolving any industrial dispute. A good industrial relations increases the morale of employers, each think of their mutual interest, which paves way for introduction of new methods, developments, and leading to adoption of modern technology. Profit is shared, workers get their dues in the organization, leading to job satisfaction, which is needed for good relations. Good industrial relation increase production, improves quality of work and products, efficiency of workers increased. Cost of production lowered. Bad industrial relations leads to industrial unrest, industrial dispute, and a downward trend to industry's workers and the nation. Now let us know more about industrial disputes and strikes. Industrial disputes refer to conflicts that arise between employers and employees in the workplace. These conflicts can take many forms, including disputes over wages, working conditions, benefits, and other issues that affect the overall well-being of employees. Industrial disputes can also include disputes over the interpretation and application of collective bargaining agreements and labor laws. Question number 1. What are the various methods to improve industrial relations? Answer. Some of the major measures for improving employer-employee relations are as follows. 1. Sound human resource policies. Policies and procedures concerning the compensation, transfer, promotion, etc. of employees should be fair and transparent. All policies and rules relating to employer-employee relations should be clear to everybody in the enterprise and to the union leaders. 2. Constructive attitudes. Both management and trade unions should adopt positive attitudes towards each other. The employer should accept workers as equal partners in a joint endeavor. Unions and workers, on their part, must recognize and accept the rights of employers. Question number 2. What is a strike? What are its forms? Answer. Strike is a very powerful weapon used by a trade union to get its demands accepted. It means quitting work by a group of workers for the purpose of bringing pressure on their employer to accept their demands. There are many types of strikes. Economic strike. Under this type of strike, members of the trade union stop work to enforce their economic demands such as wages, bonus, and other conditions of work. The second, sympathetic strike. The members of a union collectively stop work to support or express their sympathy with the members of other unions who are on strike in the other undertakings. 3. General strike. It means a strike by members of all or most of the unions in a region or an industry. It may be a strike of all the workers in a particular region of industry to force demands common to all the workers. It may also be an extension of the sympathetic strike to express general protest by the workers. 4. Sit-down strike. When workers do not leave their place of work, but stop work, they are said to be on sit-down or stay-in strike. It is also known as tools-down or pen-down strike. The workers remain at their workplace and also keep their control over the work facilities. Slow-down strike. Employees remain on their jobs under this type of strike. They do not stop work but restrict the rate of output in an organized manner. They adopt go-slow tactics to put pressure on the employers. Question. Explain the preventive machinery to check the settlement of disputes. Answer. Under the Industrial Disputes Act, 1947, an industrial dispute means a dispute between employers and workers or 2. Between workers and workers or 3. Between employers and employers. Industrial dispute settlement machineries. Mediation. Mediations is a process available to the parties involved in contract negotiations by which an outside party is called in by union and management to help them reach a settlement. The neutral mediator does not ultimately resolve the dispute, but instead tries to move the parties towards agreement by maintaining communication and suggesting alternative solutions to deadlocked issues. The mediator's function is to provide a positive environment for dispute resolution by drawing on extensive professional experience in the field of labor management interaction. Conciliation. Conciliation is a process by which representatives of workers and employers are brought together before a third person or a group of persons with a view to persuade them to come to a mutually satisfying agreement. The objective of this method is to settle disputes quickly and prevent prolonged work stoppages if they have already occurred. The essential hallmarks of this approach are: 1. The conciliator tries to bridge the gulf between the parties, if possible. 2. If he does not fully succeed, he tries to reduce the differences to the extent possible. He acts as a conduit through W are passed from one side to the other, coupled with his own interpretations facilitating the understanding of disputing parties. 3. He persuades parties to take a fresh look at the whole issues, through a process of give and take, and explore the possibility of reaching a consensus. 4. He only advances possible lines of solutions for consideration by the disputants. He never tries to force. Voluntary arbitration. when conciliation proceedings fail to settle the dispute, the conciliation officer may persuade the conflicting parties to voluntarily refer the dispute to a third party known as arbitrator, appointed by the parties themselves. The arbitrator listens to the viewpoints of both parties and delivers an award or judgment on the dispute. He, however, does not enjoy judicial powers. The arbitrator submits his judgment on the dispute to the government. Thereafter, the government publishes the award within 30 days of its submission. The award becomes enforceable after 30 days of its publication. The arbitration award is binding on all the parties to the agreement and all other parties summoned to appear in the proceedings as parties to dispute. Arbitration is effective as a means of resolving disputes because it is 1. Established by the parties themselves and the decisions is acceptable to them. 2. Relatively expeditious when compared to courts or tribunals. Adjudication. Adjudication or compulsory arbitration is the ultimate remedy for the settlement of disputes in India. Adjudication consists of settling disputes through the intervention of a third party appointed by the government. An industrial dispute can be referred to adjudication by the mutual consent of the disputing parties. The government can also refer a dispute to adjudication without the consent of the parties. The Industrial Disputes Act, 1947, provides three-tier adjudication machinery, namely labor courts, industrial tribunals and national tribunals, for the settlement of industrial disputes. Collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a method by which trade unions protect and improve the conditions of their members' working lives. Collective bargaining brings the employer and the employees around one table to discuss and settle many contentious issues effectively. It enables both the parties to know each other and their views, and to define their rights and obligations regarding terms of employment, working conditions, etc., through negotiations, discussions, and bargains. 1. Quetzal, explain the importance of collective bargaining. Suggest some measures for effective functioning of collective bargaining. Forms of collective bargaining. At the outset, it should be stated that there is a great deal of variation in the collective bargaining practices, ranging from an informal oral agreement to very formal and detailed agreement. Collective bargaining takes the following forms. It may be a single plant bargaining, that is, bargaining may be between a single trade union. This type of collective bargaining prevails in the United States and India. 2. It may be a multiple plant bargaining, that is, bargaining may be between a single factory or establishment having several plants and the workers employed in all these plants. 3. It may be a multiple employer bargaining, that is, bargaining between all the trade unions of workers in the same industry through their federal organizations, and the employers' federation. In India, collective bargaining has been classified under 4 categories. These are agreements which are negotiated by officers during conciliation proceedings and are called settlements under the Industrial Disputes Act. 2. Agreements which are concluded by the parties themselves without reference to a board of conciliation and are signed by them. Copies of such agreements, however, are sent to appropriate governments and to conciliation officers. 3. Agreements which are negotiated by the parties on a voluntary basis when disputes are sub judice and which are later submitted to industrial tribunals, labor courts or labor arbitrators for incorporation into the documents as parts of awards. These are known as consent awards. 4. Agreements which are drawn up after direct negotiation between labor and management and are purely voluntary in character. These depend for their enforcement on moral force and on the goodwill and cooperation of the parties. Tactics or strategies in collective bargaining. The tactics or strategies to be adopted in any collective bargaining situation vary depending upon the culture of the organization and different environmental factors, particularly the type of union operating in an industrial establishment. But the following are some of the common strategies to make collective bargaining exercise more meaningful. 1. The management must anticipate the demands and understand the main directions in which the demands are going to be placed. Negotiations are best done if both the parties do their homework well. The representatives must come to the bargaining table equipped with the necessary information and supportive data regarding the company's economic status and prospects, the prevailing rates of pay and conditions of employment in comparable industries in the local areas. The management team should take into consideration the financial liability involved, the past agreements. 2. It is essential that a real team spirit is maintained throughout the negotiations. For this purpose, it is necessary that the roles to be played by each member of the team are properly pre-assigned, and each member knows when to take over the discussions. The team must have the confidence of facing any eventuality which may come up during negotiations. The team must have the power of taking decisions. The team must consist of people who have confidence of the workforce and unions. It is good to have a rehearsal among the team members on such points which can be anticipated to be made forcefully by the opposite team. 3. Any collective bargaining strategy should firstly separate the personalities from the problems for arriving at a workable and desirable agreement, and secondly, explore the possibilities for harmony and compatibility. 4. Collective bargaining is two-way traffic. The management as well as the union must gain out of collective bargaining. Hence, the management team should also present their counter-proposals. For instance, the union pressure for a wage hike may be matched by a counter-demand for an increase in production, reduction in absenteeism, avoidance of wasteful/restrictive practices, industrial peace, and so on. 5. There is a greater necessity on the part of the management representatives to give a patient hearing to the demands of the union and not to react even if there is a threat of strike or work stoppage. A rational, well-reasoned approach can achieve better results than an emotionally charged, loud-mouthed approach. Labor legislation, labor management cooperation/workers' participation in management. Factory legislation, labor management cooperation refers to the relationship and communication between management and labor, usually in the context of a workplace or unionized environment. It involves the sharing of information, decision-making, and problem-solving between management and labor in order to improve productivity in working conditions. It is often seen as a way to increase worker satisfaction, reduce turnover, and improve overall organizational performance. What is the Apprenticeship Act? Answer. The Apprenticeship Act, 1961, was enacted by the Government of India to regulate and control the training of apprentices. The Act intends to achieve two objectives. I. Promotion of new skills. 2. Improvement/refinement of old skills through theoretical and practical training in several trade and occupations. Employers covered by this Act are under a statutory obligation to provide training to a prescribed number of people. However, the employer is not bound to offer employment to the apprentice upon completion of training, nor is the trainee bound to accept any employment offer, unless the apprenticeship contract specifies it. Question. List the benefits, in detail, available to the employees covered by the Employees' State Insurance, ESI, Act 1948. Answer. The Employees' State Insurance Act, 1948, it has been enacted with the objective to secure financial relief in cases of sickness, maternity, disablement, and provide medical benefits to employees of factories and establishments, and to their dependents. The Act is also applicable to non-seasonal factories using power and employing 10 or more employees and factories not using power and employing 20 or more employees. Employees and employers contribute to the scheme and various benefits are given to eligible employees, such as I. Sickness benefit, in cash. 2. Maternity benefit in cash. 3. Disablement benefit, in cash. 4. Dependents benefits in cash. V. Funeral expenses in cash. 1. Medical care, medical facility available within Employee State Insurance Corporation, ESIC, on payment of 120 rupees per annum. 2. Sickness benefit, primary, secondary, and tertiary medical care with no cap on individual expenditure. 3. Extended sickness benefit. 4. Maternity benefit. 5. Permanent disablement/temporary disablement, the disability lasts benefit. 6. Dependence benefit. 7. Rajiv Gandhi Shramik Kalyan Yojana, unemployment allowance. 8. Incentive scheme to employees for employing persons with disabilities. 9. Medical care to retired IPS. International Labour Organization. International Labour Organization is the specialized agency of the United Nations, UN, dedicated to improving labor conditions and living standards throughout the world. The functions of the ILO include the development and promotion of standards for national legislation to protect and improve working conditions and standards of living. It can be mentioned here that the ILO standards have been ratified by all the countries irrespective of their political complexions or economic development, and also varying forms and number depending upon many factors. India is also greatly benefited by the ILO standards for the welfare of the workers. Question. Discuss the main conventions, recommendations and other means adopted by ILO to protect the interest of the working class worldwide. Answer. International Labour Organization is the specialized agency of the United Nations, UN, dedicated to improving labor conditions and living standards throughout the world. The functions of the ILO include the development and promotion of standards for national legislation to protect and improve working conditions and standards of living. The ILO also provides technical assistance in social policy and administration and in workforce training, fosters cooperative organizations and rural industries, compiles labor statistics and conducts research on the social problems of international competition, unemployment and underemployment, labor and industrial relations, and technological change, including automation, and helps to protect the rights of international migrants and organized labor. The ILO conventions and recommendations have been greatly honored by the working class all over the world for their humanitarian benefits and missionary zeal. These ILO standards are considered the embodiment of social justice by the underprivileged, a Magna Carta of their liberty and proclamation of their freedom and dignity against tyranny, whether social or economic or political. It can be mentioned here that the ILO standards have been ratified by all the countries irrespective of their political complexions or economic development, and also varying forms and number depending upon many factors. India is also greatly benefited by the ILO standards for the welfare of the workers. The following conventions/recommendations of ILO are important in recurring to basic human rights. A. Freedom of association and protection of the right to organize. B. Forced labor. C. Equality of opportunity and treatment. Freedom of association and protection of the right to organize. Convention 1948. This convention provides that workers and employers shall have the right to establish and join organizations of their own choosing without previous authorization. The public authorities are to refrain from any interference which would restrict the right to form organization or impede its lawful exercise. These organizations shall not be liable to be dissolved or suspended by administrative authority. It also provides protection against act of anti-union discrimination in respect of their employment. This convention has been ratified by Albania, Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Belarus, Cuba, Denmark, Dominican Republic, Finland and France. Federal Republic of Germany and India have not ratified this particular convention. As regards the Trade Unions Act, 1926, it limits the number of outsiders in the executive of a trade union. Right to organize and collective bargaining convention. This convention enjoins on workers to join or not to join union with full freedom without fear of dismissed. It called upon the member states to create conditions and institutions for promoting land, ensuring the right to organize, negotiate between employers and workers' organizations with a view to the regulation of terms of employment and conditions of employment by means of collective agreement. In India, the right to collective bargaining has been greatly impinged by compulsory adjudication, which leaves little chance or scope for collective bargaining in the industry. Moreover, the freedom of negotiation and bargaining is substituted by governmental procedures of compulsory conciliation and adjudication. Politicization of trade union has impeded the growth of collective bargaining in India, and the government, using trade unions as pawns in their political game, do not like to promote collective bargaining. Abolition of Forced Labor Convention, Convention 105, 1957. It may be said that Article 23 of the Indian Constitution prohibits forced labor or involuntary labor, and so an indirect constitutional compliance of the above convention. However, Article 23, 2, empowers the state government to impose it compulsory for public purposes like flood and other national calamities. Convention and recommendations concerning equity of opportunity and treatment, equality in the matters of employment opportunities and treatment, and in particular prevention of any discrimination on the grounds of sex, race, religion, or place of birth, forms a golden race of social justice. Thank you so much for watching the video till the end. All the 4 units of industrial management have been uploaded on my channel, do watch them. Suggestions are welcomed. Hope you do well in your exams. Subscribe for more.